there was an interesting thing you put out about a study of Australian men being asked about therapy, and it was 45% of men dropped out of 1,900 men that did the study. It found that 45% dropped out of therapy, and that 26% had said they'd had one session, which is obviously you're measuring literally men opening up, right? So that is men talking, right? And over just under 50% dropped out of it, and only a quarter went to one session. But then there was sort of going on from that. It was the
reasons.
gap between the genders of who was actually doing the therapy. So the majority of therapists being women, and the lack of male therapists that we don't have. Why do you think that's happening?
I just say, well, yeah, half of men that go to therapy in Australia that was studied dropped out, and then a quarter only went to one session. And I feel like if we're going to measure anything on that, if there was a cricket club, just to stick with you, and then half the people that went to cricket never came back, or did come back, but not for very long, I'd be like, there's a serious problem with whoever's doing the coaching here. I'm sorry to say, Lewis. But no one ever thinks about that. And it's very, very true. And I must say that research by Zach Seidler from Movember, and I know I've said some bad things about Movember, but they've also done really great work as well. It's a very mixed bag. So I appreciate that paper, and it's very interesting. And yeah, I think there needs to be more men in therapy, more men giving therapy, more men creating these spaces, finding new approaches, maybe going to the beach or the ocean with their clients to sit down quietly and think, or doing the different parts of social prescription talked about. There needs to be a renaissance within therapy and the psychological industry in general that better sees men's distress and better supports men, especially suicidal men. And a lot of that is just by having a more male point of view. Like, I think we've grown very used to the idea that a workplace that's dominated by men, especially at senior level, will create a working environment that is better suited to men. That's obviously a very feminist idea that I agree with. And we've seen a huge change in 20 years. Like, the financial sector has changed a lot, so that is less true than it's ever been. But we don't ever look at the psychological industry, and you look at like clinical therapists, clinical psychologists are 80% women, and no one even really considers that maybe having 80% of clinical psychologists being women will create, inadvertently, it's not that they're doing it on purpose, but will inadvertently create a set of ideas and practices that are more suitable for women and designed for women, which they are. And I think that's reflected in the research that says men are dropping out because number one reason why men dropped out in that survey, that study, was I didn't have a connection with a therapist. So if half of men are dropping out of therapy, and the number one reason for them dropping out is I didn't have a connection with a therapist, then why on earth are we blaming men? Like, blame the therapist. Not again, it's not their fault, but blame the fact that we don't have a good enough set of solutions within the therapeutic environment, rather than just the men. Like, they've turned up, haven't they? That's all they can really do.
When I read that stat, I only placed myself in that experience, and I've spent so much time in Australia, and I wondered what that stat would be like if it was America and the UK, because I still think there's a large stigma around therapy in Australia. There's still the whole "she'll be all right, mate," and that sort of characterization of men. But when I thought about when I sought out therapy, it took me 2 years to find a therapist. From the moment I said, I think I need to be doing this, to then actually doing it and setting myself up for it. And the reason being, and I think, George, this is the arsehole corner of my personality, is that, and it probably did come from sport, was that I felt I needed someone credible. So in sport, there is an element of when you're being coached someone, especially at the pro level, you kind of want to say, who are you to tell me what to do? You need to show your credibility as to why you're doing that. And you go into reasons how people show their credibility. But I felt in the male space for therapy, there were a lot of people that were kind of doing it for the sake of it being, well, I've been a trained yoga teacher as well, and you kind of want to feel like you're healing the world. And when you go and you can feel empowered by having maybe the label of therapist that you're just going to heal all men. But at the same time, I think my experience has been that men sometimes want to look up to the person they're talking to sometimes. I feel like women will happily be sort of told what to do by someone equal to them, and they'll have that shared experience. Men kind of want to be told what to do a little bit. And so therefore that person that does it, they kind of feel like there needs to be like a level of credibility and solid. So for me, it wasn't even about the credit. I didn't actually care about the credentials of my therapist. I actually cared about their life experience. And just so happens my therapist is like one of the most academically, like, he's got so much credibility behind his experiences of life and what he's been in. He's been a doctor, he's been a neuroscientist. He's literally so credible that I was like, and the way he spoke, the way when I met him and we were talking about existentialism and philosophy, and I was like, wow, okay, this guy is pulling me in towards a version of myself that I want to be, not only just kind of therapy, but almost mentoring. And that for me was a big driver for sticking with him. Whereas I felt if I had looked at someone, well, I did find people where I was like, I don't feel your life experiences, or again, it sounds harsh. Again, this is the arsehole corner of my personality. Is like, it doesn't feel like this feels credible enough to kind of tell me what I should and shouldn't feel and how I should feel, or hold the space for me to be able to talk about this. So that for me was in what I felt.
I don't think you're alone feeling that way. I think a lot of men, they want to see their role models as role models, something that they've got that they want. And if someone's not got something that I want, then I'm not sure why I'm taking advice from them, whether that's any sort of advice, including therapeutic advice. It reminds me a lot of, and I'm leaning quite heavily in now into the classic gender stereotypes of men are from Mars and women are from Venus, which argues that in these situations, women just want to be heard and men want a solution. So when a woman goes to her partner and she has a problem, she just wants to be heard. She's like, I've experienced this today. I want to talk to you about it. I want to feel heard. I want you to give me space. That's typically what a woman wants, but certainly not all women. Whereas a man typically doesn't necessarily want to be heard. He just wants a solution. He just wants a solution to his problem. And obviously there's a generalizations, but it shines new light on that classic argument where a man is trying to support his wife or vice versa, and he's providing solutions, and she's like, you're not listening to what I'm saying. I just want to be heard. Stop telling me, do X, Y, and Z. Just listen to me. I'm not looking for. And then he's like, why is she not doing this and that? And I've given her the solution. She's still talking about it. And it's just, I think, generally speaking, we come at problems from different angles, men and women, which is why we make such a great team. But yeah, I would say you're not alone in the sense that many men more often at least, want a solution to their problems and are less interested in being heard, whereas women perhaps more often want to be heard and aren't as interested in a solution. So all the more reason to have more men in therapeutic spaces giving therapy to men like you.
If you enjoyed that clip with George and you want to enjoy the full episode, all you got to do is head right here.